Hi, everybody, and welcome to another of our Saturday recaps where I introduce you to the bloggers that populate my blog roll. You know, that little thing down here on the lower right side. Jack Urso is an excellent blogger. He has traveled through the radio world, he's been a professor, and he currently operates the Aeolus 13 Umbra weblog where you can find everything from the esoterics of broadcasting to recaps of classic children's science fiction shows to just whatever happens to come into his very fertile mind. Jack, it is a pleasure to have you here on this Saturday morning. Thank you for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Chuck. It's a great way to spend a Saturday morning, and I am particularly pleased to have you interviewing me because I am in total awe of your writing ability. You are a writing machine, my friend, and my goal is just to get one blog entry out a month, and 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 I think I don't know how many you do a day, but I know I was listening to you and Roger last week. You both are clearly prolific, and it's a rate at which I don't think I shall be able to maintain or catch up to you. But thank you very much for having me on board.
Well, I appreciate it. Now, Jack, one of the things that people who may not be completely understanding when they go to your blog and they see Aeolus 13 Umbra and they say, hmm, carry the one. Please, for those who are too afraid to ask.
Well, it's Aeolus 13 Umbra actually came across my mind as a possible name for a literary journal I someday might like to have. Back in the 90s, I was thinking about this. And as I was trying to come up with some kind of a artsy name, I was watching on Sci-Fi Channel a Lost in Space marathon. And of course, I mean, that first episode was so promising. You know, it was going to be a thriller in outer space. And Dr. Smith, Dr. Zachary Smith, was an actual intimidating antagonist that first episode before he became the punchline. But Dr. Smith, who sabotaged the Jupiter 2, he worked for a secret intelligence agency called Aeolus 14 Umbra, and when I was, and of course, I took Latin. Oh no, but I took Latin in high school, and and I was thinking about what I knew of that in Greek, and I go, well, if I change that slightly, Aeolus 13 Umbra, a loose translation could be, and I explained this on the About Me part on my blog. A loose translation could be the dark shadow of an unfortunate wind. So I focus a lot on things that influence society, business, art, culture, or me personally. Um, uh, very rarely do I get into my own personal angst. I sometimes do, but usually it's more of set in what was going on in society at a particular time. Uh, uh, I do a lot of historical essays. My major for my master's degree was liberal studies, which I chose because there's no way I have such a short attention span that there's no way I was going to focus on just one thing. So it allowed me to major in both literature and history. And so I've got separate categories for literary and historical essays, which I'll explore anything from, my great two-parter on Vlad Dracula to analyzing toy commercials from the 50s and the 60s and how they reflected society at the time. And I'll do, of course, right now, a couple months ago, I did a long one on the broadcast history of New York Network, a former New York State broadcast facility. Um, and it just took so much out of me. I've just been doing some poetry for the past couple months because it's much less intensive. So I kind of shift between the essay writing and poetry. I sometimes do spoken word productions, not just me reading, but layered with sound effects. Because I have a background in radio and in audio production, and so I thought that would be a good way to sort of dredge up some of my old skill sets. And every now and then, I'll even throw up an old radio piece I did and try and explain what was going on in it, who I was interviewing, which station it may have been for. I did news. I was a news anchor, and I did political commentary for a short time, less than a year, at the old WQBK, which is something I guess we can get into later if you want.
Of course. I did want one of the things I really enjoy about your blog is that there will be times when you will find the history of a TV show and you will go hog deep into it. Everything like the writing credits, the time slot it was on, the factors in its survival or its eventual cancellation. And then you'll go episode by episode into what were the strengths and what were the weaknesses of each show. Now, if I was to just throw out a name or two or 12 of various 70s sci-fi shows, and you were to say to me in like 20 seconds or less, this show should have been better than it was. This show never got a chance. Somebody was on some serious mescaline when they created it.
Yeah,
Um, this show's budget was less than the couch change I have, that kind of thing.
right, right.
All right, let's start with everybody's favorite, The Star Lost.
The Star Lost. I have got fond memories of the Star Lost because I think it was the only TV show my father and I actually watched together. It only survived about 13 episodes, and among sci-fi television fans, it's regarded as one of the worst efforts ever produced, which is unfortunate because it had Keir Dalia, maybe mispronouncing his last name,
Right, from
uh,
2001.
right, and and I'm forgetting the director producer's name. Uh, the gentleman who did Silent Running with Bruce Dern, and the special effects. He was behind. He was the showrunner for the Star Lost, and there was great promises of new special effects camera work that didn't just quite work out. And the actors they had for individual episodes, Barry Morris from Space 1999, uh, Donnelly Rhodes, who was Dr. Carter in the in the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, and many other fantastic actors. But Harlan Ellison and Ben Bova sort of put the show together based upon a Harlan Ellison idea. And if any, and of course I can hear the eyes rolling all the way back in the heads of any of your viewers who know anything about science fiction and Harlan Ellison, who was perhaps the most mercurial personality in science fiction. And
By the way, Jack, I'm just getting a message. We're now being sued by the estate of Harlan Ellison for mentioning his name.
I wouldn't be surprised. A very complicated personality, but he and Ben Bova, Harlan Ellison hated it, and he asked for his name to be changed to Cordwainer Bird for the whatever episodes of his scripts they used. And Ben Bova completely disowned it. And Ben Bova, by the way, is the gentleman who wrote the first novelizations of the original series Star Trek episodes. And he hated it so much that he even wrote a short story about this experience set as a sci-fi and a sci-fi experience. So Star Lost, only 13 episodes. It was a missed opportunity, even though the science fiction, even though the special effects weren't great. Yeah, I'm a little familiar with the kind of video effects generators they were using at the time because I was working at a local production studio at a church in Schenectady that had great up to date stuff, including, I believe, the same video effects generator that they would have been using. And There was great promise there. You know, you don't expect Star Wars from a Saturday morning TV show. Of course, this was before Star Wars. But and How I judge these shows is whether I remember anything of it. And I hadn't seen an episode of The Star Lost literally since the show went off the air in the early 70s, 74, 75. I think it was just 73, 74 it ran, something like that. And I remembered several episodes, not their names though. And then when I found the episodes again and I, you know, got them online, because the copyright on it either lapsed or something like that. And it just blew my mind how you can remember something from 40 years ago, 45 years ago. And So I figured if I remember it, then it was either awfully good or awfully bad. But in either event, it was worth noting. And it's a teeth gnasher for sci-fi fans to be sure. The special effects are pretty bad in places, but you have to sort of admire the producers for trying to put something like this on TV between Star Trek and Space 1999 and trying to keep sci-fi alive when, frankly, it was kind of a desolate region. I mean, there was a few things. I'm a big fan of Logan's Run and things like that, but you can't really compare the output of sci-fi going on today to back then. There's just so much more stuff going out there. So,
My argument has always been with science fiction that the best science fiction out there is truly an allegory for something in our world today.
right,
And I would use the argument of shows like the original Battlestar Galactica being a space-like retelling of the Book of Exodus and the Israelites leaving Egypt with the Cylons chasing them. Um, the reboot, of course, a reinterpretation of the 9/11 tragedy.
right.
I would argue that the Fox TV show Alien Nation, which I used to love,
That was a great show. That
that
was a show.
that really was a retelling for me of racial relations where they used the newcomers as what today might be the AAPI or the black or brown or marginalized Americans that are not white and their opportunity and their struggle to be heard.
Right, right. That was a great show. My father and I, in fact, watched that one together as well. And Hard to tell what good old dad would like or not like, but
Well, I guess my point would be, how do you feel about that theory that really the best science fiction out there is a window on our lives today?
I absolutely agree. And because certainly Star Trek has borne that out. And that's the frustrating thing with the Star Lost is, you know, the premise of the Star Lost, they're in this colony ship and they're all cut off from each other, all these different domes, and they've all progressed into different periods of Earth history, of development, and so each week they'd visit a different dome, and maybe they'd be like the Amish, maybe it'd be like 1984 and George Orwell, and so that was the frustrating thing is that it fitted to that vein. And I think for episodic TV, that's probably the best use of Star Wars of science fiction because it gives us this distance between what's going on in our lives right now because we do want to be entertained and there's nothing wrong with that to forgetting the world's problems. But one of the best episodes of Star Trek, which comes out of the third season, which not everybody loves, but was the one with Frank Gorshin, who plays
Let that be your last battlefield.
right. Yes, when he's half black and half white on one side, and the guy he's chasing is half white and half black on the other side. And there's this one great scene where they're basically discussing Vietnam, and this conversation is going on, on Friday night TV in America in 1967, 68, whenever that episode aired. And I remember although I was just about old enough to watch the original series, it wasn't until the 70s I was old enough to really get into it. And I remember when that episode hit home, it's in the 70s. I knew Vietnam veterans. I knew people who protested the war. The Knickerbocker News, which I delivered, was on front page nearly every day, and yet to see that episode just allowed me as a young person to sort of explore it a little bit more detachedly, because I don't know if I'm making that sense, because there were some horrible things I saw growing up, including that famous Pulitzer Prize winning picture of the girl who had all of her clothes burned off in a napalm attack.
Mhm.
That was on the front page of the Times Union, of the Knickerbocker News. That would never run on the front page of the Times Union today. Never. And
No,
yet it was on the front page of the Knickerbocker News. I know because I delivered it, and it freaked me out. It freaked me out. And that Star Trek episode helped me to sort of digest what what was going. I was maybe 10 years old or whatever when that episode, when that incident happened in the war, and maybe nine. It helped me to digest it, and I think that's why Star Trek is so fondly remembered by so many Gen Xers and baby boomers. Is because it on those episodes it really kind of, I think, sort of was almost cathartic and allowed them to sort of deal with what was going on at the time. Of course, I'm reflecting upon this as it was, happening. But it's like I see this in the newspaper, and then I watch that episode, and you wonder, And I have to say, my politics are greatly influenced by Star Trek as an adult, all these decades later, because of those episodes.
there you go. Now, I did want to touch on the fact that you were involved in broadcast radio in the Capital District. You mentioned WQBK. You worked on that station.
Mhm.
And if I remember reading correctly, you've had some experience in picking up some signals while at WQBK that, shall we say, were not from the capital region.
No, they were not. This was I was working the double shifts in the summer of '88, and I worked from like 7 at night to about 8 or 9 in the morning, and most of what I was WQBK at the time. It's now WGDJ, but basically doing the same thing they were doing back then, which is talk radio. Although it was definitely a much broader. We had liberal talk show hosts, we had moderates, we had conservatives, we had a sports show, we had chat shows. I mean, it was a whole mixed bag. The current environment of political talk was just about beginning, and I did some there for a while. But I was working overnight, and I would be playing around, and I wasn't supposed to do this, but I wanted to see what else was out there. So one night I was playing around with the satellite channels, just switching them completely random, seeing what I could pick up. And I picked up a network feed, and we were CBS, I think, at the time, because we were airing Charlie Rose's program. So yes, and we also ran the CBS Radio Mystery Theater, another common interest of ours. So I picked up, I think it was, I forgot what network it was. It wasn't CBS. And what the networks do is that they package sound bites. And back then, what they would do at specific times, maybe on the quarter hour or whatever it was, they would shoot out a couple minutes of these packages. And I believe that's what I caught, was that signal. And it wasn't from Radio Beijing itself, because I believe they only operated on shortwave. And so I would not have picked that up on Saturday. This is very wonky. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. But uh, so I believe that's what I caught on the satellite. It was another network's satellite feed of packaged sound bites from the Tiananmen Square, that was ongoing at the time. So this was June, was it 3rd, 4th, something like that, when the Chinese government finally said, okay, that's enough, we're going in. I and I picked up this signal, this sound bite, 90 seconds of an English-speaking Radio Beijing announcer saying, and this is literally the only official Chinese government honest report about what happened there at Tiananmen Square. And he said, "Look, many people are dying, and because the government force is attacking us, including personnel who work for Radio Beijing. And you have to understand, this was incredibly brave of this person to get on the air and do it." And I was working for Amnesty International, not working, I'm sorry. In college, I got involved with Amnesty International. I was still getting publications from them. And the best I could find out, that Amnesty International could find out, was that the script was written by some party head, by the son of some party head, who was then exiled to Hong Kong. And then but the announcer's name was not known, not reported. And periodically after that, whenever I work in news, I poke around. I try to find, what's going on. Did they ever find out the name of this announcer? 10 years later, I'm taking a class in producing the radio documentary with Gerald Zahavi, who still teaching at SUNY Albany. A great, fantastic teacher, by the way, great professor. And he encouraged me to do more work on this. And so one Friday night, I was really frustrated. So I just called up the Washington, D.C. Offices of Radio Free China. I forgot. I should know it off the hand. It doesn't exist anymore. But they had representation in China. So I just called them up, and I said, "Hey, do you know anything about this?" And of course, I'm speaking to people who don't, English is not their native language. So first of all, they had to figure out exactly what I was talking about. And the gentleman I spoke to listened for a time, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I think we have somebody here who was there that evening." And he translated for me to her. And he says, "Well, she says she doesn't know, but she'll look into it and get back to you." And then about 6 months later, I get a package in the mail of a bunch of publications with very rare photographs of the massacre, and saying, "Oh yeah, his name's Yuan Neg." And that was it. And it blew my mind. And then for another, I guess, 10 years after that, or 15 years after that, I start my blog about 10 years after that, 2010. And I get an email from a professor at an Australian college. And he says, "Oh, you know what? One of my colleagues knows that guy." It's like, yeah, it's like he's the milkman. Yeah, he knows him, and figured out he was. And I'm not sharing anything that's secret now, but found out that he was actually living in Los Angeles. He somehow made it to America, is living in Los Angeles, but didn't want to talk about. He doesn't want to talk about it. The only interview he's done in since 1989 was to a Hong Kong news channel, and that was it. And so I finally found out this guy exists, and actually, there's been some. I try to, there's been some interest. People, a French documentary newsmaker, a front page editor at the Wall Street Journal, one or two other people contacted me about it, but his story hasn't been widely told. It's a very dramatic story, and one of the bravest broadcast, because there could have been no doubt in his mind what was going to happen to him. The only report I heard was that he was executed, and thank goodness he was not. But I was persistent over the course of about 30 years in trying to get this guy's story together and out. And the first time I did my blog, I've done two blog articles on it. First time I did it, I didn't real I only, what I thought was his full name, UN Neg, was actually just his second name. His full name is Chen UN Neg, and which I'm probably mispronouncing, and my apologies. But it was just one of those things that kept going, and I was amazed to find out just how many commentators on that blog and on the when I posted it on YouTube, and people commenting in Chinese, and I'll translate, and it's just phenomenal how many people. And I had somebody who's native to the area, was working for a news agency not to be named, uh, and contacted me from China and said, I was able to view this on the company's intranet. And I showed it to some of my Chinese colleagues. They never heard about this. They didn't. They only knew a little bit about Tiananmen Square, not much, and certainly nothing about an English speaking Chinese broadcaster who reported it. Um, and so it reinforces to me that while journalists take a lot of punishment for what they do in the pop by other journalists for what they do, we can't forget that there are true stories of courage. I mean, and I imagine one of the reasons why he doesn't want to discuss this is because he still has family back in China. He got out. Who knows? I mean, and that's a story in itself. How, in God's name, did the Chinese government let Chen Yuen Neg out of their country? How did that happen? And that's the movie that Ben Affleck should be making. That movie right there. He did Argo. Now you can do this story, Ben, because that in itself.
Better Ben Affleck, or if I end up being Liam Neeson or something.
Something like that. But that must be a tremendous story in itself, and the U.S. intelligence agencies must have been involved somehow in getting him out there. So that's definitely one of the mysteries that my blog has delved into, and so yeah, and it's called "The Lost Voice of Radio Beijing." And if anybody's interested, if they just Google that title, they'll probably find a link to it um, pretty quickly.
Couple more questions on our beautiful Saturday afternoon. One of the things that you have done in your life, and you still do today, you are a teacher, you are a professor. How have you been able to take the lessons that you have learned in life from your broadcast days, from what you've grown up and learned, and been able to impact that onto these young minds? How have you been able to become the Professor Kingsfield to these young paper chasers?
Well, unfortunately, Professor Kingsfield is one of my models for instruction. I do tend to be quite Socratic in my approach, and an A minus is an A minus, and a B plus is a B plus, and a B plus is not an A minus, no matter how well you argue it. So there's some things I am pretty Professor Kingsfield about. Um, uh, but and Yeah, I teach composition, technical writing, and public speaking. And one thing I try to do when I bring up a story from my past, um, I try to inspire them to look for their own stories in their own life. And so yeah, so we're discussing the narrative. I got a couple narrative stories I'll share with them. In fact, one of the reasons why I started my blog was because I wasn't practicing what I'm preaching. How can I teach the narrative to students if I'm not writing a narrative? How can I teach research paper writing if I'm not writing research papers? And so that was one of the reasons why I set up my blog. And I don't like to do self promotion, but occasionally, I'll bring in an article from that I have written. One coming up that we always take a look at is my brilliant analysis of Frank Zappa's 1986 crossfire debate with John Lofton on whether or not music videos should be censored, because all that sexy Duran Duran videos was going to poison America.
Oh, if Frank Zappa had lived long enough to meet
uh,
Lil Nas X.
right, and it's if people want to check it out, just you can Google Frank Zappa and Crossfire, probably find the video quite quickly, or go to my blog, Aeolus13umbra.com, and you will find it's the number one blog post this week. And it's pretty, a lot of what we are experiencing today, Frank Zappa kind of saw back in 1986 in what he termed a fascist theocracy. And it's enlightening because Frank Zappa, he describes himself as a conservative. I think he'd be libertarian if he was still alive today. But he's got a pretty, originalist kind of constitutional view about things. And so I'm watching this conservative fight it out with this other conservative, and it's a brilliant piece of rhetoric, and so it's a way for me to get student. Nobody knows Frank Zappa or his music. It's not like he's the Beatles. I mean, he's as influential as the Beatles and Zeppelin, but students nowadays don't know his music. They don't know his name. And
Right, right. You couldn't, some kid on the street, you couldn't ask him to name five Frank Zappa songs if you spotted them Valley Girl
right,
and, let them say Joe's Garage as an entry.
right. They wouldn't be, and so it gives me an opportunity to open their minds up to that. I'll work in a Monty Python clip. That's something that people just kids nowadays, that it's not quite as well known, and so I just but I get back to stories that I've experienced, and to inspire them, because what I try to do with my blog is I try to find the literary quality in whatever it is I'm writing or studying about. That article on the Star Lost, it may seem like it was an ephemeral TV show, but how could I turn this into something that was of literary quality, an actual valid literary review of the Star, and there's certain rules you follow and things like that, and your own style, and so that's kind of what I try to impart is what's the how can you discover the literary value in your experience? I don't know if value is the right word upon it, but how to turn your experience and view it through a literary lens, in terms of, and what I mean by literary in this case is when we write short stories about our lives, or even fictional, we're trying to find some and express some sort of truth that's transcendent in this experience. It's not. I'm not just telling a party story, And then some of my short stories started out as party stories, and one of them was this Radio Beijing thing. I would tell, so, oh yeah, and I'd be at a party. I'd tell people about this, and of course, invariably came the follow up question: oh yeah, what happened to that guy? And I didn't know, and so that's what started me to do this research, is because what was the how could I change this party story into something that had some sort of literary value? It's not going to be a factoid, or a little blurb in an article. It's going to have gravitas all upon itself. It has a climate. There's rising action. It has a climax. There's falling action. even, and there's a resolution, even though it's just a news report essentially. So so when I bring in something from my experience, it's to get students to think about the viewing their own experience in a literary lens, I suppose. Would be
And
the way.
one follow-up question that I always ask as part of these interviews: where do you feel the future of blogging is going, both generally and with Aeolus 13 Umbra?
Um, well, uh, generally, and I don't know how this pans out to being accurate, but I think that the presence, I've going back 20 years or so when I started reading other people's blogs. I think Facebook sort of provides an outlet for some of that natural desire for people to communicate socially. And I don't know what are the core numbers of blogs, how many are being created every day, how many are abandoned and are never continued. Um, uh, I don't know what the numbers are, but I somehow feel that social media like Twitter and Facebook and other things have sort of taken the place or filling that need, and that may decrease the number of personal blogs such as yours, mine's, Rogers or Dan's and that may and the others on your blog roll. That may diminish some of them. um, so I would perceive that I would, if I were to guess, I would say that has social media, will is so prevalent and will continue to grow. Um, I think that what that blogging need was is being fulfilled in Facebook posts and Twitters. If maybe I'm wrong, and the number of personal blogs like ours that are out there are, they're continuing to grow, and I'm wrong in that, and that may be true. And I hope so. But if the numbers are going down, I suspect it's because that need is being fulfilled in other ways. And but I love having my own personal literary journal. My own promise to myself was when I was doing research and thinking about all the blogs I've seen, and the saddest ones are the blogs that they just kind of somebody is posting a lot one year and then a little less the next year, and then it just kind of peters out, and it's their last post was somewhere around 2010, and are they alive? Are they dead? What happened to this person? And so my vow was that I would post every month something new every month, something that I worked on that was creative. If it wasn't new, because I got a whole wealth of stuff I've written in the past, then I would rewrite something before I would post it again. And so that in some way it's new. And I think I got my blog to a balance of where I like it in terms of the different things I'm covering. Sometimes it's a sci-fi series review. Sometimes it's music. I'm a big fan of world music and indigenous music from around the world. So if I can post an album with cuts on it, I will do it. One of my consistently highest viewed blogs is on the Johnny Quest TV series soundtrack, and in some forgotten bin at I think a 2015 New York City Comic Con, I found what is clearly a bootleg of the master tapes of the original Johnny Quest series. So I posted it, and ever since I posted it, and uh, it complements the video on my I posted on my YouTube channel as well. It's consistently my highest hit. That and my Logan's Run article are consistently the ones that get the most hits on my YouTube channel and on my blog. Although I don't, it takes, I don't do articles like that very often because the waters are kind of shallow in terms of the things that I can post and get away with without, incurring copyright, because I don't like posting things if I can't, a review if I can't post some element of that, whether it's a clip or something, and I post it myself. I get the DVD, and I get the cut, and I edit it out what I can post. And sometimes complete series I've been able to post because both the copyright holder and the licensee holder are both defunct. And that's how I've gotten some of those other Saturday morning TV shows up, because and others, they are being enforced, and I don't know why they haven't been taken down yet, but we won't talk about we won't talk about that.
Let's not poke the animals too hard if we should. Jack, it has been such a wonderful day here. Thank you so much for participating in this. For those of you that want to read more about Jack's blog, right down there in the blog roll, there is Aeolus 13 Umbra, where you can go to aeolus13umbra.com and you can check it out there. Once again, Jack, thank you so much for being part of this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chuck. Great series. I'm looking forward to hearing more from my other bloggers on your blog roll.